Jackson Riley focused intently on the glowing notification displayed on his digital tablet. It was a confirmation of his assignment as a host for a visiting exchange researcher from Erin. His fingers tapped nervously against the surface of his cramped desk in the research lab within the University of California's Department of Xenobiology. The message contained basic details about his upcoming house guest, Ilara, a Level 3 xenobiologist. "You actually agreed to host one," exclaimed Dr. Simmons, startling him from the doorway. "That's a bold move for someone who almost never leaves the lab." The department had insisted on it, Jackson thought, quickly minimizing the message. They had explained it would be beneficial for interdepartmental relations and, according to Dr. Simmons, his own social life. Dr. Simmons smirked as the overhead lights flickered erratically, a low hum vibrating through the building. Jackson checked his wristwatch. The time had apparently arrived, and he hastily made his way to the designated arrival zone located behind the xenobiology facility, smoothing his somewhat rumpled lab coat. A swirling vortex of blue-white energy illuminated the courtyard as it began to dissipate, and a tall, distinctly feminine figure materialized. Jackson's breath caught in his chest. The Erin stood nearly 6 feet in height, her cerulean skin emitting a subtle, shifting bioluminescent glow. Massive, silver eyes dominated her delicate features, reflecting the evening light like polished mirrors. Despite her alien appearance, there was something undeniably graceful, almost ethereal about her presence. Her voice possessed a melodious quality as she spoke. "I am Ilara, a third-level researcher of comparative xenobiology. You must be Dr. Jackson Riley." "Just Jackson is fine," he replied, extending his hand, then awkwardly retracting it, unsure of proper Erin customs. Ilara tilted her head slightly, studying the gesture. With one fluid motion, she reached out and grasped his hand. Her skin was surprisingly warm, with a faint tingling sensation where they made contact. "Fascinating," she stated, pulling out a small device, tapping rapidly on its surface. Human greeting customs involve physical contact, with a notable variance in electrical conductivity between our species. Jackson couldn't help but smile. "Are you taking notes?" "Always," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Your research on cross-species cellular regeneration is quite impressive. I look forward to our academic exchange." The walk to his apartment was filled with Ilara's constant observations, as she documented everything from the way leaves moved in the wind to the sound of passing cars. Her genuine fascination with the mundane aspects of Earth life was oddly endearing. Jackson's apartment was modest but neat, dominated by books and research equipment. "It's not much, but there's a spare room, perfect for your observational equipment," he told her. Ilara moved through the space, her skin pulsing with subtle patterns of light. "Your dwelling contains an impressive collection of knowledge storage devices." "You mean books?" Jackson inquired. "Yes, physical information repositories," she responded, running her fingers along the spines. "We abandoned such methods centuries ago, but I find them quite charming." Over the next few weeks, Jackson found himself to be the subject of intense study. Ilara documented his morning routine, his work habits, even the way he prepared his meals. Her questions were endless, and often amusingly direct. "Why do you produce that rhythmic vocalization when experiencing amusement?" she asked one evening after he laughed at a particularly absurd conclusion in one of her research papers. "You mean laughing?" Jackson asked, setting down his tablet. "It's an involuntary expression of joy or humor." "Fascinating," Ilara said, typing more into her device. "And the physical contact humans frequently engage in, these hugs and handshakes, they serve what purpose?" "Social bonding, mostly," he explained. "Humans are very tactile creatures." Ilara's skin rippled with patterns he was beginning to recognize as indicators of interest. "Erin physical contact is highly regulated. We require specific emotional and environmental conditions for any intimate interaction." "Really?" Jackson asked, trying to keep his tone professional, despite his curiosity. "That must make relationships complicated." "We don't form relationships as humans do," Ilara replied, settling beside him on the couch, closer than usual. Our reproduction is a purely biological function, triggered only under precise circumstances. Jackson became acutely aware of her proximity, the subtle glow of her skin casting shadows on the wall. That sounds very efficient, yet arguably less satisfying. Ilara's silver eye studied his face intently. Human pair bonding seems far more complex, but also more fulfilling. Your species integrates emotional and physical intimacy in fascinating ways. The conversation was veering into dangerous territory. Jackson cleared his throat. It's getting late. I should probably. How does it feel? Ilara's question stopped him mid-rise. Human attraction, physical desire, these concepts are foreign to my species, yet I find myself curious. Jackson's heart raced. Ilara, I'm not sure this is appropriate. This is not mere scientific inquiry. Ilara's skin pulsed with new patterns he'd never seen before. I want to understand, not just academically, but experientially. Would you be willing to help me experiment? The air between them crackled with tension. Jackson stared at his alien houseguest, his mind racing with the implications of what she was suggesting. Everything about this screamed bad idea, yet he couldn't deny his own growing fascination with her. I think, he said carefully, we should discuss exactly what kind of experiment you have in mind. Ilara's skin brightened with what he now recognized as excitement. I believed you would say that. I've already prepared a detailed research protocol, as she pulled out her ever-present data device. Jackson wondered exactly what he was getting himself into, but watching her enthusiastically outline her plans for studying human intimacy, he realized he was more intrigued than alarmed. This was either going to be the most interesting research project of his career, or the most spectacular disaster. Possibly both. Research protocol? Jackson rubbed his temples, trying to maintain professional composure as Ilara projected a holographic display from her device. Complex diagrams and charts filled the air between them. Precisely. I've broken down human courtship and mating behaviors into analyzable segments. Her fingers danced through the projection, highlighting different sections. Phase 1 involves increased physical proximity and casual contact to establish baseline responses. Hold on, Jackson waved his hand through the hovering charts. You can't quantify attraction like this. Human relationships aren't a laboratory experiment. Ilara's skin dimmed slightly. Then how do humans determine compatibility? We just feel it. He struggled to explain something he'd never really thought about scientifically. It's instinctive, natural. Nothing about this feels natural to me. Her voice carried a note of frustration he'd never heard before. On Aora, everything is structured, predictable. Here, humans touch constantly, laugh freely, express emotions without protocols. She stood pacing the small living room, her agitation manifesting in rapid pulses of light across her skin. Yesterday, I observed a couple in the park. They were sharing a frozen confection, ice cream, yes. The male offered his portion to the female, letting her taste from his eating utensil. Such behavior would be unthinkable on Azora, yet they seemed to derive great pleasure from it. Jackson couldn't help but smile. It's called sharing. It's a sign of intimacy. Intimacy through shared bacterial exposure? Ilara's silver eyes widened. Fascinating, though highly unsanitary. That's kind of the point. Jackson found himself warming to the topic, despite his earlier reservations. Intimacy often means letting your guard down, being vulnerable with someone. Ilara stopped pacing, turning to face him. Would you be willing to share your frozen confection with me, Jackson? The question caught him off guard. There was something in her tone that suggested she understood the deeper implications of what she was asking. I think, he said carefully, we could start with ice cream. The next evening found them walking to the small ice cream shop near campus. Ilara attracted curious stares from other customers, but she seemed oblivious, focused entirely on examining the flavor options. The variety is overwhelming, her skin shimmered with excitement. How do humans choose? Most people have favorites. Here, try this. Jackson offered her a spoonful of vanilla. It's a classic. Ilara leaned forward hesitantly, her silver eyes locked on his as she tasted the ice cream. Her skin suddenly blazed with brilliant patterns. The temperature variance, the molecular structure, this is incredible. She grabbed his hand holding the spoon, pulling it back for another taste. The sensation is both pleasant and alarming. Jackson became acutely aware of her fingers wrapped around his wrist, the warmth of her touch contrasting with the cold ice cream. See, not everything needs a protocol. They ended up sampling half the flavors in the shop, Ilara's enthusiastic reactions drawing amused looks from the staff. Her childlike wonder at something as simple as ice cream was oddly captivating. Back at the apartment, Ilara was still buzzing with excitement. I believe I understand now why humans engage in shared consumption experiences. The combination of sensory input and social bonding creates a uniquely pleasant neural response. You could just say you had fun, Jackson suggested. Fun, she tested the word. Yes, I suppose I did, though I'm not sure my superiors would approve of such unstructured research methods. Jackson settled onto the couch, noticing how she sat closer than usual. Sometimes, the best discoveries come from unexpected places. Like how humans can derive pleasure from temporary thermal discomfort. Her skin pulsed softly in the dimming evening light. Or how sharing the discomfort creates connection. Exactly, Jackson found himself studying the patterns of light playing across her features. Human relationships are full of contradictions like that. Ilara shifted even closer, her shoulder brushing his. Then perhaps I need to embrace contradiction in my research. Her voice dropped lower. Jackson, there's something I've been wanting to ask you about, human reproduction. The sudden shift in topic sent Jackson's heart racing. He opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by the harsh buzz of his phone. The department head's name flashed on the screen. I should take this, he said, standing quickly. We can continue this conversation later. As he stepped away to answer the call, he caught Ilara's reflection in the window. Her skin was glowing with an entirely new pattern, one he'd never seen before. Whatever experiment she had in mind, he suspected their simple ice cream outing was just the beginning. Jackson ended the call with a frown. The department wanted a progress report on their collaboration. Perfect timing. Ilara's skin rippled with excitement as she retrieved a small crystalline device from her room. I've been developing something that might interest both the department and our personal research. The device hummed to life, projecting a complex molecular structure. This is an Arin bioadaptation matrix. It can temporarily modify my physiological responses to match human parameters. Jackson studied the projection, professional curiosity warring with personal implications. You want to make yourself compatible with human biology? Precisely, her silver eyes met his. For research purposes, of course. Of course, Jackson's throat felt dry. And what kind of research did you have in mind? Ilara's skin pulsed with that new pattern again. I believe humans call it dating. The next few days became an unusual blend of scientific methodology and awkward romance. Ilara approached dating like a research project, complete with hypotheses and control variables. According to my studies, dinner and entertainment are standard courtship protocols, she announced one evening, consulting her ever-present data device. You mean, you want to go on a date? Jackson couldn't help but smile at her formal phrasing. Yes, though I suggest we begin with dinner. Multiple simultaneous variables could skew the results. They chose a quiet restaurant near campus. Ilara's appearance drew attention, but her focus remained entirely on Jackson. Fascinating how humans combine nutrient intake with social bonding, she observed, studying her menu. The sharing of sustenance seems to facilitate emotional connection. It's not just about the food, Jackson watched as she discovered the joy of pasta, her skin lighting up with each new taste. It's about spending time together, talking. Like our ice cream experiment. Her voice softened. I've been analyzing that experience extensively. Before Jackson could respond, their waiter arrived with wine. Ilara examined the glass curiously. Fermented grape juice? How does this enhance the courtship process? It can help people relax, feel more comfortable. Jackson demonstrated proper wine tasting technique. Ilara mimicked his actions precisely, then gasped as the wine hit her tongue. Her skin blazed with brilliant patterns. The chemical composition is causing unusual sensations. She blinked rapidly. Is this normal? Maybe we should stick to water, Jackson suggested, but Ilara was already reaching for the glass again. No, the effect is interesting. Like my thoughts are becoming less structured, she leaned forward conspiratorially. Did you know my skin patterns change color based on emotional resonance? I'd noticed. Jackson found himself drawn to the swirling lights beneath her skin. What does this pattern mean? Ilara's glow intensified. That's classified information, Dr. Riley. She attempted a wink, a gesture she'd clearly been practicing. The wine seemed to bypass Ilara's usual reserved demeanor. By dessert, she was openly discussing her bioadaptation matrix. The modifications are already taking effect, she whispered, her skin pulsing in sync with her words. My neural pathways are adapting to process human emotional responses. It's overwhelming. Maybe we should slow down, Jackson suggested, noting her increasingly erratic patterns. Why isn't increased heart rate and pupil dilation part of human attraction? She reached across the table, placing her hand over his. Your pulse has accelerated, fascinating. The walk home was a new experiment in physical proximity. Ilara stayed close, occasionally brushing against him accidentally. Human courtship involves gradual escalation of physical contact, she explained, her fingers intertwining with his. I'm merely following established protocols. Is that all this is? Jackson stopped walking, turning to face her. A protocol? Ilara's skin dimmed to a soft glow. I'm finding it increasingly difficult to maintain scientific objectivity. Her free hand traced the outline of his jaw. These sensations, they are not in any research paper. The space between them crackled with tension. Jackson was acutely aware of her warmth, the subtle vibration of energy beneath her skin. What does your data suggest we do now? His voice was barely a whisper. The logical progression would be to test human kissing protocols. Ilara's eyes searched his face. For science, of course. Of course. Their first kiss was hesitant, experimental. Ilara's skin blazed with light, illuminating the darkened street. When they separated, her expression was a mixture of wonder and confusion. That was, she touched her lips, I need to recalibrate my entire research methodology. Back at the apartment, Ilara paced the living room, her skin pulsing with erratic patterns. My readings are completely inconsistent with previous data. The neural response was far more intense than anticipated. Not everything can be quantified, Ilara. Jackson watched from the couch, still feeling the lingering warmth of her kiss. She stopped pacing abruptly. My species doesn't experience physical attraction like this. We're taught that emotional responses interfere with rational thought. Her voice trembled slightly. But these sensations, they're becoming harder to analyze objectively. Maybe that's the point. Jackson stood, moving closer to her. Human relationships aren't about analysis, they're about feeling. Ilara's skin rippled with that new pattern again, more intense than before. The bioadaptation matrix is working too well. I'm experiencing desires, urges that aren't part of my research parameters. What kind of urges? Jackson's heart raced as she stepped closer. I want to touch you, not for data collection. Her fingers traced his collarbone, leaving tingling sensations in their wake. I want to understand why my skin glows brighter when you're near, why my thought processes become disorganized when you smile. Their second kiss was different, less experimental, more urgent. Ilara's skin blazed so brightly it lit up the entire room. When they finally separated, she was trembling. My superiors would never approve, she whispered against his neck. This level of emotional engagement wasn't part of the mission parameters. Do you want to stop? No. Her silver eyes met his with newfound intensity. I want to understand everything, every human sensation, every emotional response. She pulled out her data device. I've prepared several scenarios for further investigation. Jackson gently took the device from her hands, setting it aside. No more protocols. Let's just feel.